Bonjour!
Bonsoir!
Comment ça va?
Ça va très bien et vous?
Bienvenue on JCB Live. Dear friends, you are blessed. As always, because we have the best guest in history. You know, you got to realize Francisco and I met on his show, one of the best shows there is, all about Sonoma. He started a show named Hello Sonoma. He's an anthropologist. He's an amazing 5 languages speaker. He could say the same fabulous things in 5 languages. My grandfather used to say you could say 5 stupid things in 5 different languages. So, you know, that makes us different. He's a big supporter as well of homeless shelters. And he's created an amazing show that I was so fortunate to be on. So we told him, you got to be on our show because you have so much to say, so much to explain, so much to express, so much to share. So voila! Woo! Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Alors, Francisco, who made you who you are today?
That's a great question. Well, I'd like to start by saying thank you so much for having me on the show. Santé.
We are delighted.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody who's listening and watching.
So, dear friends, I asked a deep question because we're going to go and peel all around and go to the epicenter of how he created such a great show and how you could create anything you want in life.
Well, let's see if we can get there.
So, santé.
Well, I think, as with everybody, I'm a product of many different people, many different places, many different things.
Yes.
Of course, my parents have been a big influence. I was born here, actually in Tahoe, but raised in Sonoma, to my mother, who's Brazilian, and my father, who's classic American, if there is such a thing.
What is classic American?
Well, he grew up with a dream that he wanted to be a rancher, that he wanted to be involved in ranch country in the West, which I think is one of the strong symbols of modern United States. And he kind of followed that dream in many different ways. He abandoned his medical school career and decided, I'm going to go out there and follow ranch country and see where it takes me. And so when he met my mother, by that time he was wearing his Wrangler jeans with his handkerchief in his pocket. And
the dream of many.
The dream of many, wearing his cowboy boots and sharing the beauty of ranch country with the world. So I'm the product of a dreamer dad and an international mother coming together and making me excited about wherever I am in the world.
Boom, boom. Brazilian mom, American father. And here are the blue eyes.
There you go.
So we fast forward and we'll go back to that period of time in your life. You created Hello Sonoma. How did that come about?
I did create Hello Sonoma. Well, as with many people during the pandemic, I actually came home a few months before, having been traveling a little bit. And I thought, you know, I'll be in Sonoma for just a little bit and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do with my life and I'll move on to the next amazing city. And then this little virus went around in March of 2020 and everything kind of stopped. And for the first few months, as I think with everybody, I didn't know exactly what to do. And I was, you know, oh my goodness, how long is this going to last? Weeks, months?
Yeah.
And now it's apparent that it's lasted years. But what I did is I started to turn to what I've always loved in going to a new place, which is learning about the people.
Yeah.
And so I looked at Sonoma as a place, imagined it as a place that I'd never been to, despite having lived there for a long time. And I started interviewing the people around me and just hearing their stories and writing them down and writing little articles, not for anybody in particular, but just for myself.
Wow.
And
pretty cool.
And so these articles helped me realize that, you know, the local chief of police or the local teacher or the local homeless shelter or the local thrift store person, all these people have fascinating stories of how they came to be who they are. So the opportunity came about to be on the radio to give a PSA about Homeless Services Center. And I was called forward and I said, sure, I'd love to do it. And as a joke, they kind of said, this must be your first radio show. How does it feel? And I said, well, you know, I was lucky enough to have a radio show in college called Francisco from San Francisco. I wasn't sure on the name. I didn't have any good branding.
I like it.
Yes, I'm sure you maybe
Francisco Square.
Francisco Square. And so I said, no, I actually have had a radio show. And they said, well, how would you like to have a show here in Sonoma? And that interview process just kind of led itself perfectly to radio as a format where you could sit across the table or on the couch with a glass of wine with a guest and just talk about their story. Because, yes.
And what interests you in people? I know you've studied anthropology, of course, which is one of my favorite topic of all topics.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, it's the study of human culture. But I firmly believe that everybody has a story. I'm sure you've known this with your travels around the world, that everybody does have a story. And every story can be interesting if you just ask the right questions. Now that's the tough part, is to find the right questions.
That's right.
But I've been lucky enough to do some traveling in my life through my dad's business and my mom living in Brazil and getting to know different people. And I've come to realize that wherever you are in society, whatever avenue you choose to follow, you have a story, and it's worth listening, and I can always learn from whoever I'm talking with.
So explain to all of us, how do you ask the right question? And first and foremost, one needs to be genuinely interested in others. So how did you get this? And then how do you ask the right question?
Well, you asked me at the very beginning how I became who I am. And my mother, being from Brazil, is just one tiny part of her identity. More than anything, I think that she's curious. And she always stops to remark of the insects walking on the ground, or the trees as they're blooming, or the capital of Kazakhstan, or various different types of curiosity. And I think since young, I've been encouraged to be curious and to seek out new knowledge wherever it hides. And so that applies pretty quickly to other people. I think you'll love this analogy too. My dad always loves to speak, when he's speaking with someone, he likes to say he uncorks them. In other words, kind of ask them little questions until they start talking, and they talk and they love it, and it's their passion. And he calls that uncorking someone. So to find that question that'll really get them going, I think you have to know a little bit about them. And so with Hello Sonoma, I always like to research my guests. I spend hours, sometimes days, speaking with different people, finding out their whole history online. Just trying to get to those points that they're kind of would be excited to talk about if they were at a dinner party, And,
yes.
And you don't want to talk about, it was hailing yesterday. Oh, yes. It's much more exciting to talk about that semester they spent abroad in Cannes, where they got to see the film festival. And
how do you succeed in a conversation? I'm very similar to you. I hate little talk. Weather is my most hateful topic.
I'm with you.
Talking about weather, can you please?
Please.
But how do you get into a discussion of someone you don't know, into the essence of it? Which is really something I adore to do as well. But explain us your techniques, because you're a professional interviewer. You do an amazing job on your show, Hello Sonoma. And everybody should listen to you. And the interview you did with me was really compelling, besides your research, because you got there. So how do you recommend we all do?
That's a great question. By no means am I an expert. I have a lot of great heroes out there. At the moment, one of them is Trevor Noah, or Stephen Colbert, big interview people, Oprah Winfrey. These people know how to dive into their guests and to get what's at the essence. And I think the most important factor is to show genuine curiosity and to really listen. The biggest technique I learned, which was from a TED Talk, who's the author of which I will not remember at the moment, but he said that the most important thing is to let the silence rule. In other words, when you ask someone a question, you say, "How are you today?" And they respond, "Oh, I'm good." And you just kind of keep looking and wait for the rest. They're likely to fill that silence with what they're really thinking, that they're too afraid to say, or that they've been filtering. And that's when you start to see some really interesting answers. People get to reveal themselves, and they feel comfortable knowing that you actually want to hear that answer.
That's right.
And so that's something I'm still learning, and it's been a wonderful experience so far.
So when you do interviews, how much research do you do on the people themselves?
Well,
versus spontaneity, which is as well very cool to do.
Yes, I think that's important too, is to listen and to know when to shift. We can't just stick with our questions. But, I usually do at least 4 to 6 hours of research on each person, which is not that... I know that I have somebody scheduled for a couple weeks who they sent me her book. So I have to read her book, which is going to take longer than 4 to 6 hours unless I really turn the pages. But I think it's worth it. You only have 1 hour of time.
Yes.
And you never know. You want to, like you said, what a shame to spend 30 minutes talking about the rain.
And as you see someone, how quickly do you know where you want to go, and how dare you going where you wish to go, if you feel there's a resistance of going there?
That's a good question too. Well, at least for my show, my goal is to make my guests look as good as I know they are.
Yes.
So my goal is not to, shame them or bring up something that's kind of too touchy.
Mm-hmm.
Those are important parts of their experience, but in public, sometimes you don't want to share that. I think it's important to be vulnerable. It's important to be sharing of moments that you might not share with other people, but at the same time to take care of yourself as a guest and listen to your inner voice about what you really want to share. So I think the reaction of the person is a good lead.
Yes.
If they feel excited about it, then that's where you keep going.
Yes.
And if they're kind of, then you stop.
Now, how did your studies of anthropology really help you to become what you're doing today and to become so strong at what you do?
Great question. Well, anthropology, the study of human culture, and a lot of old anthropology was what was called armchair anthropology, where you'd have these scholars sitting in some Oxford library writing about the savages and, the South, it didn't matter where. But since then, anthropology has evolved into ethnography as one of the disciplines, which is immersion in a culture.
Yes.
And you kind of really become a part of it, and talk to people and learn about them and live in their culture to really understand what's going on. And that's something that I've always admired, reading different ethnographies in college. But I think in my life, how that's manifested itself is wherever I go, I try to be involved in that place.
Yes.
There's many communities of expats who are living their own lives, which is fine, but they choose to experience it with the other foreigners instead of really getting to know the place that they're in. And I think that's too bad, because you can meet foreigners everywhere. You can't meet locals everywhere. And so that's been a huge part of connecting my anthropological studies to what I do now.
So if there was an anthropologist you recommend we all read, I'm going to give you mine in a moment. Who would be yours as far as how to dive into the study of humankind and who we are and what we are and where do we come from and how we becoming what we becoming? Because in many of what we could say, it's been written.
Yes, you're right. History is much vaster than the present. Well, there's the classics. There's Malinowski, who was a famous person who wrote about the Southeast Asia. Mm-hmm. There's Claude Lévi-Strauss, French guy,
my favorite.
Your favorite, who wrote.
Well, I love the Levi Strauss jeans, of course, in California, but I love him as well. Easy name to remember, the same, and I've had the pleasure to see him many, many times.
Really, wow.
Yeah.
Well, he wrote some great stuff about Brazil. Margaret Mead, of course, who wrote about Africa and different things like that. But I think we have this idea of anthropology, many of us, that it needs to be ancient cultures or distant cultures, or it's far away and it's exotic and it's everything. But I think it's important to remember that wherever you are, you're in part of a culture.
That's right.
Sonoma and Napa, they have a culture. And so does Washington, D.C. has a culture, which is familiar. And so I'll just recommend two of my professors who are not as well known, but Alexander Dent, who focuses his studies on how the cell phone affects our society, I think is fascinating. And Sarah Wagner, who looks at mourning for soldiers in different areas and how finding them changes the relationship with them and the war and everything like that.
So how does cell phone affect us?
Oh man, where do we begin? I think cell phones affect us in so many different ways. People love to say cell phones are 100% negative, but I think what cell phones do and what the internet does is amplify everything. It can make us happier than we've ever felt, and it can make us sadder than we've ever felt. It can make us reach out as far as possible to people in new horizons, and it can make us more connected to the people that we love. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just kind of an amplification of everything that we do.
And you mentioned a Sonomian may be different than someone from Napa. Go back to Northern California. So give us, what is a Sonomian?
A Sonoma.
Or Sonoma person.
Yes, a Sonoma person. That's a good question. Sometimes we get to define each other based on what we're not, but I won't go there. I'll say we're just what we are. I think
sure.
Sonoma is a beautiful little historic town. As you know, you're involved with the Buena Vista Winery there.
Of course.
The first commercial winery in all of California.
And you're going to have to finish your bubbles because I'm going to serve you some.
Okay. That's
I cannot have a man from Sonoma without drinking the history that actually should flow in his blood, because I'm sure half of what you intake is Buena Vista wine.
Yes, of course. I actually do always try to bring my friends to that area there to connect them to the history. I think that's important whenever we come to the valley. But I think Sonomans are known for their friendliness. I think all small towns are. How could you not? When you know everybody, you have no choice but to be kind, because they can find you. They know where you live. They know where you go to the store. But more than just a sense of obligation, Sonomans try to look out for each other. At least that's our higher goal.
And do you think there's really a true Northern Californian style, or Sonoma style versus a Napa style? And how would you differentiate Sonoma versus Napa?
Well,
we're not talking wine yet.
No, not yet. I've always felt that Napa was a little bit more polished, a little bit more pristine, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And Sonoma has always felt a little bit more rustic in whatever way. These are not positives or negatives on either side. It's just a different kind of feel. It's kind of like you go to the mountains, you want to be in a cozy little cabin, versus you go to the beach in Malibu, you want to be in this ultra modern, flat house. And they're both great feelings. So I think, Sonoma with the mission there and everything is a little bit more closer to the roots of the ground, and Napa is paving the way into the future.
So how is JCB 21 affecting you?
I feel ebullient. I feel it's effervescent. I feel alive and well and excited to be here on this red couch of JCB Live.
So you're going to have to finish now, because I'm going to serve, Francisco, now the famous Buena Vista Pinot Noir, because, it's all about Pinot in Sonoma. Francisco, you've been interviewing a lot of people. How would you say all of that has affected, changed, or made you who you are today?
That's a great question. Well, as a young person, I feel that in certain ways, I mentioned that the cell phone and the internet amplifies everything.
Yeah.
So in certain ways, young people are presented with more options than we've ever had before. And at the same time, we're kind of told that we need to follow a certain set of successful paths in order to be who we need to be successful. And so interviewing people, from all walks of life has shown me that the path to success, or the path to feeling, fulfilled,
Yes.
is not a straight line, but it's a zigzag pattern that takes you up into the mountains and down into the valleys and through the forest.
Right?
Sometimes you're covered in mud, and sometimes you're covered in sand or whatever.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to happen. And so interviewing people has opened up more possibilities, I think, for me. Not in an overwhelming way like you do if you go to the jelly bean factory and you're trying to choose a flavor. But
that's a good exercise.
But in a way that's kind of more like you're at the airport and you're trying to decide which destination you can go to. There's so many possibilities, and choosing any of them will be great.
What makes individual to you? Cheers, by the way.
Cheers.
Ooh, beautiful nose.
Listen
wow.
to
Woohoo! This is a bomb. I'm actually overly impressed with this wine. 2017 Bella Selection. Wow. The daughter of the Count of Buena Vista.
I'll ask you a question. You're known for using really exciting big words to describe the wines, not like, chartreuse or any of these words that sometimes can be intimidating. What adjective would you use?
Well, emotions. I feel that wine creates an emotion within you that, rather than saying, oh, I feel the beautiful cassis with a hint of strawberry and maybe a finish of raspberry with red berries. Oh, great. Okay, we know where you're going. This wine makes me feel ethereal. This one makes me feel romantic. This one makes me feel deep and rich into the comfort of the velvets, and wants me to talk and express myself, or wants me to be more, inspired by something specific, which is, in this case, I think delicacy and romance and beautiful verses. And this one makes me feel very poetic.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I'm very inspired by this one.
Any poems for us today?
Yeah, Lamartine.
Lamartine.
Lamartine, very famous French poet. That's what I would recite right now. Not in English because I only know it in French, but...
You're welcome to recite it.
Ooh la la. What about you?
Well, the only poem I know is actually a French poem, and it's in French.
Which is? Who
Which
is?
is, I don't know who the author is, but tu dis que tu aimes la pluie, mais quand il pleut, tu fermes tes portes et tes fenêtres. Tu dis que tu aimes les fleurs, mais tu leur coupes et leur mets dans un vase. Tu dis que tu aimes le poisson, mais tu leur coupes la tête et tu le manges. Donc, quand tu dis que tu m'aimes, j'ai peur.
Oh, ooh.
Isn't that good?
That's a very good one.
That's a good one. I don't know who it is.
I'm going to recite that one again. So you've created this amazing show that you're very successful at. So what is the next step on it? What are you trying to achieve with it?
Ah, yes. Well, so
Hello Sonoma.
Hello Sonoma is the name of the show.
Maybe there's another one coming soon. Hello Napa.
Maybe.
Or Hello San Francisco.
Well, that's exactly the idea. I think what I've learned the most through my experience in Sonoma, as a small town, not as a tourist destination, but just as an American small town, is that the people around you are fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And we have so much connection to the outside world that we often forget to look right in our backyard. So my vision for Sonoma, for Hello Sonoma in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, is that towns across America and around the world will all have hello, Almaty, Kazakhstan, or hello New Delhi, or hello London, or even boroughs in those places that are local radio stations and podcasts that explore the stories of the people in their area. And of course, we'd have exchanges between them where people would learn from other places. But ideally, it would be an exploration of each new generation and their stories and their...
And how far can you go with this? Because are people interested in, if they're in Kazakhstan, to hear about people from Sonoma, or is it always local attracts local?
I think it's a combination of both. I think local attracts local because, if you're in Napa, you would love to find out about the local bookstore people, or you love to find out how did JCB wines come to be the way that it is. But I also think that people from Sonoma might have a curiosity about how does a regular person in Mongolia live, or how does a regular person in Algeria live? And just hearing a regular story, there's no news, there's no achievements per se, there's no anything. It's just, how do they live? And that's fascinating.
So how do we make people more curious to want to listen to this? Because I have a feeling often, people are into milestones, certain level of knowledge, certain, standards of what they want to hear after 10 minutes, and then they drop because it's not enough content oriented, or it's not XYZ. Yeah. What's your advice there? What's your view?
Well, I think that the self-help industry has had an incredible boom over the past 30 years. Tony Robinson?
Yeah.
Is that his name?
Tony Robbins, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Tony Robbins. And
Basket Robbins, it's easy.
That one's much better. I like
If you don't want the ice cream, you get the guy.
Exactly. And they've had a huge resurgence because people are looking for ways in which they can live their life better, and ways in which they can improve their lives. And in essence, what those people are doing is telling their stories, how they live their lives better. And so we have these idols of what it means to be successful, what it means to live. And I think that the way to really be successful is to live your own truth. You mentioned in our interview when we were talking about fashion, that fashion is your way to express yourself and just be yourself.
That's right.
And I think that we should do that with our whole lives. We shouldn't be limited by what our society tells us. So I think that in the same way that self-help had this huge boom in the past 20 years, we're going to hear personal storytelling is going to have a huge boom in the next 20 years. If you look at TikTok, for example, many of the most popular TikToks are the ones of people across the world who are doing their dances or sharing their stories, or even more politically, seeing armed forces moving around the country. And so I think, despite the fact that we have limited attention spans in some regard, we're always interested in human storytelling. It's the only tradition that we've kept for tens of thousands of years.
Yes.
Back then we were huddled around a fire, and now we're huddled around our...
But why do people feel so compelled to want to share something of that nature? Take TikTok, over 90 seconds, I assume, or a minute, or 60 seconds.
Yes. I think more than anything, people want to feel seen and they want to feel heard. And many of these media allow us to do both. Sometimes it's really quick, it's transient, but it's a quick moment of feeling like you're heard and seen. And people are always so obsessed with views and likes and comments because those are analytical measures of how much you've been seen and how much you've been heard. And so I think that everyone really wants to share their stories in different ways. And if there's an audience to put it out there, there's always an audience to listen.
You're a good listener.
Well, thank you. I try to be.
How did you become such a good listener?
That's a good question.
I'm not sure it is.
I think
it's a tough answer.
It's a tough question and a tough answer.
Are you a good listener?
I don't know. We'll see.
Patrick, you're about to deliver. Are you a good listener? It's about to start. Dylan, you're on the edge. Are you a good listener?
Well, when I grew up, I was forced to play piano. Now it's...
I relate to that. Yes. My hands were tight to
exactly.
the piano.
I had to play piano. I feel incredibly lucky now that I was able to do this, but at the time I didn't like it at all. And then eventually I started being able to play with other people, and it became one of the most exciting parts of my life, which is music. And in music, the most valuable thing you can do is listen to those around you. Because when you listen, you get to come up with new ideas, and you have this amazing sense of collaboration that really only exists, I think, in my experience, in a musical setting. And so that taught me the power of listening, the power of playing what you want, but also taking the time to quiet yourself and to listen to what's going on around you. So that I think that skill translates very well into listening to people, because when you really listen, people share a lot more, and you get really intrigued, and you can dive down the rabbit hole of people's experiences.
So what's your advice for people to learn how to listen? As a couple, the biggest complaint couples can get on one another: you're not listening to me. You're not listening. You're hearing me. You're not listening. It resonates to everyone here.
Yeah, everyone's got that.
And I could go on and on. So how do you recommend for you as a professional interviewer, as a great listener, for all of us to really learn how to truly listen? How to get to that space where we neutralize maybe the energy and we really welcome the sound and the meaning of the sound?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm no expert. I'm still learning this, but I think what has been interesting for me is to imagine everybody as if they have a treasure inside them. And just by listening, that's how you're going to find it. And I think often it's true, the thing that you might be looking for, that you're thinking of, that you're, how do I do this thing, might be hidden in whatever someone's about to say. And so if you listen to them like that, that can be a key. And I am by no means, the perfect listener, the immaculate listener here. I have lapses like everybody else. As a matter of fact, most of my life is lapses in my listening ability. But occasionally I do it well, because I try to picture that treasure and open my ears to the possibilities.
So what is your treasure?
My treasure?
Well, there's a lot of people very excited to know here. They want to know those blue eyes, treasures hiding behind that facial hair. That's how we call it these days, right? Beard.
Yes, exactly. Well, I don't know if I have a particular treasure that I would share with anybody, but...
really? How come? Why wouldn't you want to share?
Well, if anything, I think that the power of listening is my treasure, that opening up people to the world around them. And I'm by no means the first to do this, but searching around you for what you have. And someone once told me the phrase of bloom where you're planted. And in other words, if you imagine all the wildflowers in the hills of Napa here, you can imagine that they didn't have a choice of where they were planted, but when they bloom, they're this beautiful color that you see from across the valley. And I think that all of us have that opportunity to be a treasure where we are.
So what's the hidden side of you that you've never shared that now you will?
The hidden side of me, the secret Francisco.
That's it.
Well,
there's a lot of your friends watching. We want to make sure that they get to know you.
They really get to know me. Well, if my friends are watching, they'll know that I'm not especially out there on social media or on any of the media. I update my stuff once every couple of years.
Okay.
And I don't really show my face or anything.
Really?
So this for me is kind of the secret Francisco. You get to hear me talk about
on a red sofa.
Yes, on a red sofa in a lovely room with a wonderful host here.
Thank you.
So the secret Francisco is one who really shares what I'm thinking and talks for a little while and shares some beautiful wine, and just chats about life.
So, anthropology background, big supporters of others, obviously very curious about people. What inspires you?
What inspires me? That's a good question. Well, you have this marvelous painting over here of some really big heroes of mine: Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Mother Teresa. Looks like Mozart, a couple of other people,
Yeah.
Dali. And what inspires me is people following their dreams to the fullest extent that they think is possible. One of the articles that I wrote early on was for myself, and I didn't really publish. I did publish it, but it wasn't, for an audience, just for myself.
Yes.
Which is the idea of creating more than we consume. And so what it really inspires me is people who are creative in whatever way they want to be. One of my friends recently just got published in a scientific journal for implanting special electrodes into the brain so that people who are paralyzed can communicate with a computer.
That's amazing.
Amazing. And that to me is real creativity. Another friend of mine is a writer, just published their first novel. Another friend of mine is writing poetry, who they publish on their social media. And others are, creating films, creating music, creating beats, exploring new places in the world. And so to me, what really inspires me is someone who says, this is my inner journey, this is my treasure, my secret, and I'm going to follow it to the fullest extent I think is possible. And really believe in yourself and to do it with kindness and with openness and bringing others into your circle.
Well said. Well said. So, on that note, what is your dream at this stage? As you created something amazing with Hello Sonoma, that is obviously a great success. You're diving into people's life. You're curious. You're inspiring others. You're letting people to see the light and be inspired thanks to others as well. What is your next dream?
My big dream. Well, my big dream, I think, is to inspire others to really feel like we're part of a global community. It's something that I've felt since I was little, being able to travel. And you realize, if you go to Argentina or Brazil or France or England, that everyone is living the same human experience in a new environment, in a different culture. But that same human experience, we all have to sleep, we all have to eat, we all dream, we all get sad, we all love music, we all like to dance, either in public or in private. And so I think to inspire others with curiosity through this network of either it's Hello Sonoma or it's something else, if other people want to do the same thing too, that would be marvelous. So to inspire others to look out for their fellow humans and to believe that they see themselves in each other, that's my big dream.
Well, on that, what has been the biggest revelation for all of us in the last 24 months?
That's a big question. Well,
well, you interview people. You're with people now a lot, whether through Zoom or radio or mics.
So the past 24 months have been unlike anything we've ever experienced as a collective. For centuries, for millennia, we've all had our own individual experiences in each valley or mountain or cave or, island. But for the first time ever, I think, we had a pandemic in which all of us around the world were experiencing the same things. I could call my cousins or my friends in other countries and say, how are you doing? We're locked down. We can't do anything. And that was the same thing I was feeling. And so it was the first unique moment of full human connectedness, where we really felt like we were all living through the same thing. And we were all baking bread. We were all outside the windows clapping for hospital workers. And we were all doing these same things in our languages and with our own songs. So I think that's the most important lesson that we've learned over the past 24 months, that we're all in this, to borrow a quote from the famous High School Musical, we're all in this together.
Now, didn't we learn in addition to this that we need one another?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, the interdependence of one another has never been, I think, highlighted more than now. Wouldn't you say so? I mean, we need to be together. We are insects who like to interact with one another. I mean, we miss each other. We want to be together. We need to gather, bars, restaurants, nightclubs, whatever it is, see one another. I don't think we could really live through a screen.
No, absolutely. One of the most moving images that I saw throughout this whole moment was a grandmother who was covered from head to toe in plastic, hugging her grandchild. I mean, how amazing is that? That
Yeah.
she felt that, you know, it was dangerous or whatever, but she was willing to do whatever it takes to get that close human connection.
Yeah.
And though not all of us have grandparents or grandchildren, we all have humans around us. And I think we've felt the importance of, you know, I have friends who always talk about how much they spent on coffee because they had to leave the house to go get coffee, even if they had a mask on, just to have some kind of real human-to-human connection.
Right.
And so, you know, that's irreplaceable.
Yeah, so this is why as much as I love some of the Odyssey movies of the future, of planets and tubes and little cells, I'm not sure we will ever be as the humans we know how we are. We kind of need those levels of interaction and
Absolutely.
proximity and all that.
Yeah, before the camera started rolling, we were talking about the metaverse. And the metaverse is an exciting new frontier because it creates an illusion of proximity, which is
Yes.
really important. But that actual proximity is the most important thing that I don't think we can ever fully replace.
I'm with you. As much as I want to play in the metaverse, I think at some stage you just want to transcend the image
Yes.
to go into the reality of non-virtual reality. Right?
Yes, the world is an exciting place if you just step into it.
So now, big moment. What do you think of this wine?
Well, I think it makes me feel exuberant. It's we love to use the word big when we describe red wines, but I think it is big, and it helps that it's in this enormous glass where you have the full bouquet
The passion,
emanating from it. Oh,
the sound.
it actually is very loud. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's
Loud.
it's really marvelous.
So, Francisco, the last big question for you as you look at the camera, the big message to the world,
Okay.
the message that you want to transcend to and give an intense vibration into everybody's skeleton, what would that be?
Wow. Well, my message to the world, for now at least, is to listen to your neighbors, whoever they are. They all have fascinating stories if you just get them going and ask the right questions.
And I must confess, I'm delighted you went there. This is how we met. You know, Francisco reached out for his interview. We hit it off, and here we are, and we learned his great story, great inspiration. Wonderful time. Hello, Sonoma. Soon, hello, Napa. Hello, San Francisco. Hello, Nueva York. Hello, Mexico. And thank you for this great time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Well, wise advise, anthropology, languages, others, interview, how to go into other people's minds, how to be curious, and how to allow yourself to be curious. So lots of wonderful, phenomenal thoughts.
Thank you.
Dear friends, see you soon.
See you soon.
Hello, Sonoma.
JCB Live.